3 weeks earlier, Claire Bennett almost did not open the diner door for him. It was 10 minutes past closing at Rosie's, the little 24-hour-looking place that was not really 24 hours anymore, because the owner could not afford the electric bill after midnight. The neon sign in the window buzzed pink and blue against the wet sidewalk, and the last customer had left behind $2 in quarters, a coffee ring, and a napkin with a phone number Claire had no intention of calling. Her feet ached inside black slip-resistant shoes that had lost their cushioning a year ago. Her apron smelled like fried onions, burnt coffee, and lemon cleaner. Outside, March rain slid down the glass in crooked lines, turning the streetlights into blurry gold halos. Claire was counting her tips at the counter, lips moving silently. $9, $10, $11, $12.35. Not enough for the bus pass, not enough for the prescription refill waiting at the pharmacy, not enough for the rent envelope hidden under her mattress. She pressed the coins flat beneath her palm, as if she could make them multiply by sheer will. That was when she saw him through the window. A man stood under the narrow awning beside the trash cans, shoulders hunched against the cold, one hand tucked under his opposite arm. His hoodie was dark and soaked at the edges. The brown delivery jacket over it had a tear near the sleeve. He was not begging. He was not even looking inside. That made it worse somehow. He just stood there, trying to disappear politely. Claire looked toward the kitchen. Manny had already shut off the grill. The register was closed. The rule was clear: no free food. No exceptions. Not after the owner caught a teenager slipping leftover biscuits into his backpack last winter. Claire heard Derek Sloan's voice before she ever knew Derek Sloan existed. The voice of every person who had ever told her kindness was bad business. Do not get involved. You cannot save everyone. But the man outside lifted his injured hand for a second, staring at a thin line of red near his knuckles, as if surprised his body could still complain. Claire sighed, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. Cold rain air rushed in. "Hey," she called softly. "Are you waiting for someone?" The man turned. His eyes were gray, maybe blue, hard to tell in the neon glow. Tired eyes. Careful eyes. The kind that measured exits before answering questions. "No," he said. "I am sorry. I did not mean to stand so close to your door." That almost made her smile. Most people apologized for what they did. He apologized for taking up space. "You are bleeding." He glanced at his hand. "It is nothing." People with nothing usually say that. He looked at her then, really looked, and something unreadable crossed his face. Claire held the door wider. "Come in before you catch pneumonia. I have coffee that tastes terrible but works fast." He hesitated. "I do not have any cash on me." "Good thing the coffee is terrible." This time, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. More like he had forgotten how, and his face was testing the shape. He stepped inside, careful not to drip too much on the tile. Claire pointed to booth 7, the one with a cracked red vinyl seat and the best view of the street. "Sit. I will get a towel. You really do not have to do this." "I know." She disappeared behind the counter and came back with a clean towel, a small first aid kit, and the last slice of apple pie from the dessert case. The pie was supposed to go home with her. She had pictured eating it in her tiny kitchen with the space heater humming by her ankles, pretending the cinnamon made the room warmer. Instead, she set it in front of him with a fork. The man looked at the plate like it was a contract he did not know how to sign. "I said coffee," he murmured. "I heard you." Claire poured him a mug. Pie helps the coffee apologize. He gave a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. She sat across from him without thinking, took his hand, and cleaned the small scrape with the practical gentleness of someone who had bandaged burns, cuts, and tired hearts her whole life. His hand was warm despite the cold, stronger than she expected, but he held perfectly still. "Warehouse door?" she asked. "Something like that." "Delivery driver?" "Something like that too." She glanced at the faded patch on his jacket. "You have a name, something like that?" He paused half a second too long. "Ethan." "Claire." "I know." Her eyes narrowed. He nodded toward her name tag. "It is on your apron." "Right." She laughed under her breath, embarrassed by her own suspicion. "Sorry. Long night." "Mine too." He took a bite of pie, and for a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped the windows. The old clock over the counter clicked toward 12:30. Claire could feel the diners settling around them, tired but safe. "Why help me?" Ethan asked at last. Not casual, not flirtatious, almost confused. Claire looked at him across the chipped table, at the torn sleeve, the guarded face, the way he seemed ready for rejection even while holding a fork. She shrugged, but her voice came out softer than she meant it to. Because hungry people should not have to prove they are worth feeding. The words changed something in him. She saw it. A tiny shift behind the eyes, like a locked door hearing the right key for the first time in years. He looked down at the pie, then back at her. That is a rare way to see the world. It is an expensive way, Claire said, gathering the towel and first aid wrappers. But it is the only one I can live with. When he reached into his pocket, maybe out of habit, maybe to offer something he had already said he did not have, a folded paper slipped out and landed beneath the table. Claire bent to grab it before the damp floor could ruin it. It was a printed map of warehouse routes, dock numbers, and service gates for Whitmore Global. "You are new over there?" she asked. Ethan's fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "Yes. That place is a maze. My cousin worked seasonal packing there and said even the exits need exits." She pulled her keys from her apron pocket and unhooked a small brass compass keychain, scratched around the rim, the needle still trembling under cloudy plastic. "Here." Ethan stared at it. "What is this?" "A compass." "I know what it is." "Then use it." She placed it beside his mug. "For someone who looks lost." The faint smile came back, but this time it reached his eyes just enough to make Claire look away. "First, what if I am not lost?" he asked. Claire wiped the counter, pretending her face had not warmed. "Then consider it decoration." Ethan closed his hand around the little compass like it weighed more than brass and plastic ever should. Outside, a city bus hissed past the window, spraying rain along the curb. Claire remembered her coins, her bills, her mother's medicine, the pie she had given away, and still, somehow, the diner felt less empty than it had 10 minutes before. She did not know that Ethan had a penthouse 40 stories above downtown Boston. She did not know his real last name was printed in silver letters on the building where that warehouse map came from. She did not know he had entered her life wearing a lie because he trusted almost no one. All she knew was that a hungry man had walked in from the rain, and for one quiet midnight, helping him felt like the first right thing that had happened all day. By the next morning, Claire Bennett told herself she would probably never see Ethan again. That was how life worked in her corner of Boston. People stepped into the diner cold, hungry, tired, or lonely, and for a few minutes their lives touched hers across chipped plates and coffee-stained counters. Then they left. Truckers went back to the highway. College kids went back to dorms. Nurses went back to hospitals. Men with sad eyes and torn delivery jackets went back to whatever shadows had brought them there. So when Claire unlocked Rosie's the following night and found booth 7 empty, she should not have felt anything. She told herself she did not. She tied her apron, refilled the sugar jars, wiped down menus, and listened to Manny complain about the freezer making a sound like a lawn mower full of pennies. She served eggs over easy to a retired cop, turkey melts to 2 construction workers, and coffee to a woman who cried quietly into her phone for 20 minutes. Midnight came slowly. Rain turned into fog against the window. The neon sign hummed. Claire was scraping dried ketchup off a table when the bell above the door gave a tired little ring. She looked up too fast. Ethan stood there with the hood of his sweatshirt down this time, hair still damp, delivery jacket zipped to his throat. The brass compass hung from his key ring, catching the pink-blue glow from the window. Claire hated that she noticed. "You came back," she said, trying to sound casual. "You make terrible coffee," he replied. "People get attached." She rolled her eyes, but a smile escaped before she could stop it. Booth 7. If it is not reserved for anyone more important. Around here, importance is measured by who tips and who does not make me clean syrup off the wall. He slipped into the booth. "Then I will try to be important." She brought him coffee before he asked. This time he placed $5 on the table right away, folded neatly under the salt shaker. Claire glanced at it. "You do not have to prove anything." "Neither did you." That silenced her more than it should have. She turned away to hide the warmth in her face, pretending to check the pie case. For the next hour, Ethan sat quietly while she worked, not demanding attention, not watching her in a way that made her uncomfortable, just present. When the rush died down, he asked about the broken freezer. When Manny grumbled that the repair guy wanted $250 just to come look at it, Ethan stood, rolled up his sleeves, and spent 15 minutes behind the kitchen door with a flashlight between his teeth and a screwdriver from the junk drawer. The freezer stopped roaring. Manny stared at it like it had witnessed a miracle. "You some kind of mechanic?" he asked. Ethan wiped his hands on a towel. "I have fixed a few things." Claire narrowed her eyes. Delivery drivers fix commercial freezers now. Only the loud ones. It became a pattern before Claire realized a pattern was forming. Ethan appeared at Rosie's every few nights. Always late. Always dressed like he had just finished a shift. Always with that compass clipped to his keys. Sometimes he ordered coffee. Sometimes pie. Once, when Claire admitted the bus had stopped running early because of road work, he waited outside until her co-worker arrived to drive her home. Standing under the awning with his hands in his pockets like being cold was a fair price for making sure she was not alone. He never pushed. Never asked for more than she offered. That was the dangerous thing. He made kindness feel safe. On the 5th night, Claire found him studying the community bulletin board beside the restrooms, where people posted apartment listings, missing cats, church dinners, and job flyers with tear-off tabs. He was looking at one in particular, night shift freight scanner, Whitmore Global South Dock, $16 an hour. Claire reached around him and tore off a tab. "Thinking of applying?" he asked. "Thinking of surviving." His expression shifted. "That warehouse is not an easy place. Neither is owing rent. There are other jobs. Do they pay weekly?" He did not answer. She folded the tab and tucked it into her apron pocket. "My mom's blood pressure medicine went up again. The pharmacy said insurance changed something. They always say it like insurance is a person who walked in and moved the price tag while nobody was looking." Ethan looked down at the floor for a moment. "I am sorry." Claire shrugged, because pity made her uncomfortable even when it was gentle. "It is not your fault. That does not make it right." The way he said it made her look at him. Most people heard a problem and offered a sad face. Ethan heard a problem like he was memorizing where to place the blame. "You talk like someone who is used to fixing things," she said. "Freezers, freight routes, healthcare, world hunger. Should I add the squeaky front door to your list?" His mouth softened. "Maybe I just do not like seeing good people cornered. Good people still have to pay rent. And bad people often own the buildings." Claire laughed, but he did not. His eyes were on the flyer again, and for the first time, she saw something under his calm. Anger, but disciplined. Locked down tight. "Do you know someone there?" she asked. "At Whitmore?" "Yes. I know enough to tell you to be careful." "That sounds mysterious." "It is meant to sound serious." She leaned her shoulder against the wall, studying him. "Who are you, Ethan Miller?" He looked at her name tag, then the compass on his keys, then back at her. For a heartbeat, the diner felt too quiet. "Someone trying to make better choices," he said. It was not an answer. Claire knew it was not an answer. But his voice carried a weight that made her afraid to press too hard, as if the truth was not a door but a wall with cracks already spreading through it. 2 days later, she took the warehouse job. The South Dock smelled like diesel, wet cardboard, and floor cleaner. Conveyor belts rolled beneath fluorescent lights. Workers in orange vests moved fast, scanning labels, stacking crates, calling out dock numbers over the noise. Claire kept her head down and learned quickly. She needed the money more than she needed comfort. Then, near 3 in the morning, she turned down aisle 12 with a scanner in her hand and stopped so suddenly the cart behind her nearly bumped her ankle. Ethan was there, lifting a sealed crate onto a pallet like he belonged among the night crew. He wore a Whitmore Global badge clipped to his jacket. The same jacket, the same quiet eyes, the same brass compass. Claire stared. "You work here too?" Ethan looked up, and for one unguarded second, something like alarm passed across his face. Then it vanished. "Sometimes." "Sometimes," she repeated. "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, a sharp voice cut across the aisle. "Bennett, you are not paid to socialize." Derek Sloan walked toward them with a clipboard tucked under his arm and a smile that never reached his eyes. Claire straightened immediately. "Sorry, I was checking dock labels." Derek glanced at Ethan, barely acknowledging him, then held out a stack of forms. "Sign these before you clock out." Claire took them, scanned the top page, and frowned. "This says I verified 32 crates on dock 4. I was not on dock 4 tonight. It is standard cleanup paperwork. But it is not true." Derek's smile thinned. "You want the extra hours, do you not?" Claire felt Ethan go still beside her. Not move. Not speak. Just still, like the air before a power line snaps. She looked from Derek's clipboard to the form in her hand, then thought of rent, medicine, the $12.35, the bus schedule, the way the world punished poor people for having principles. Her fingers tightened around the pen. Then she set it down on the clipboard without signing. I need the hours, she said quietly, but I am not putting my name on something I did not do. Derek stared at her. Ethan stared at Derek. And somewhere above them, in the dark glass dome of a security camera, a tiny red light blinked as if the building itself had just started paying attention. Claire Bennett learned the sound of power long before she learned who held it. It was not always loud. Sometimes it was Derek Sloan tapping a pen against a clipboard while pretending her signature was just a small thing. Sometimes it was a supervisor saying, "That is how we do it here," as if a lie became harmless when enough people repeated it. And sometimes, Claire realized, it was silence, the kind that fell over Ethan Miller when Derek looked at her like she was a problem to be erased from a schedule. The red light on the security camera blinked above aisle 12. Conveyor belts hummed. Somewhere behind them, a forklift beeped as it backed into a loading bay. Claire could still feel the pen she had refused to use, cold and slick in her fingers before she placed it back on Derek's clipboard. Derek did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You are new," he said, each word smooth and slow. "So I will pretend this is confusion instead of attitude." Claire held the forms against her chest. "It is not confusion. I did not verify Doc 4. You verified what your manager tells you to verify." Ethan took one step forward. Not enough to stand between them. Enough for Claire to notice. Enough for Derek to notice too. "She said she was not on Doc 4. Ethan said. His voice was calm, but the air around it tightened. Derek turned his head. "And you are?" Ethan's badge was turned slightly inward, clipped low on his jacket. For one strange second, Claire thought Derek might recognize him. Instead, Derek looked him over the way people looked at delivery drivers, temporary workers, cleaners, waitresses, anyone they assumed could be dismissed with a hand gesture. "I am talking to my employee." "Then talk like she is a person." Claire's eyes flicked to Ethan. Her heart moved in a way she did not have time to understand. Derek smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Careful, Miller. Night shift workers are easy to replace." Ethan did not blink. "Some people are harder to replace than you think." The words landed oddly. Derek's jaw tightened. Claire stepped in before the tension became something that could cost Ethan his job too. "I will finish my assigned pallets," she said. "But I am not signing false paperwork." Derek's gaze returned to her, flat and cold. "Then maybe you do not understand what your assignment is." He pulled the forms back, tucked them under his arm, and leaned closer just enough to make her feel the imbalance without touching her. "People who make trouble around here lose hours. People who lose hours lose rent. People who lose rent start making desperate choices." Claire felt heat rise in her face, not embarrassment this time. Anger. Real, clean anger. "Is that supposed to scare me?" "It is supposed to educate you." He walked away before she could answer, his shoes clicking against the polished concrete, his clipboard under his arm like a weapon made of paper. Claire stood still until he disappeared around the end of the aisle. Only then did she exhale. Ethan turned toward her. "You should quit." She almost laughed because of how quickly softness turned into command. "Excuse me. Quit this job, Claire. Tonight." "That is your advice?" "Yes." "Great. Should I pay my rent with your mysterious warnings?" His face tightened. "This place is not safe for you. Lots of places are not safe for people who need money. I am serious." "So am I." She shoved the unsigned forms back onto a metal shelf and reached for her scanner. "You show up at my diner soaked and hungry. You dodge every normal question, and now you are ordering me around in a warehouse like you own the place." Ethan went quiet. Too quiet. Claire looked at him then, really looked, and the sentence she had thrown in frustration seemed to hang between them with a strange weight. Like a key turning in the wrong lock and opening something anyway. "What?" she asked. Ethan glanced up at the camera, then toward the far end of the aisle where Derek had vanished. "There are things happening here you do not understand." "Then help me understand." "I cannot, or will not." His eyes met hers. For the first time since she had known him, he looked less guarded and more trapped. "Claire." Her name in his voice almost softened her. Almost. But she thought of the forms, the fake signatures, the way Derek had known exactly which fear to press. "Rent. Hours. Desperation." "No," she said. "Do not Claire me like that explains anything." She lifted the scanner. I am finishing my shift. The next 4 hours passed under fluorescent lights that made everything feel a little unreal. Claire scanned labels until the numbers blurred. She checked every dock twice, then took pictures of her assigned pallets with her cracked phone, because if Derek wanted paperwork, she wanted proof. Ethan kept appearing at the edges of her night. At the end of an aisle, near the break room, by the south dock doors, speaking quietly into a phone he hung up the second she noticed. Once, she saw him talking to a security guard twice his size, not pleading, not joking, just speaking in a low voice that made the guard nod and step aside. That was the first crack in the story. The second came near 4 in the morning, when Claire took a wrong turn searching for the employee restroom and found Ethan outside a glass-walled office marked Authorized Personnel Only. He stood with an older woman in a navy blazer who held a tablet against her chest and listened to him like he was not a temp worker, not a delivery driver, not anyone who could be ignored. The woman said, "Legal needs more than suspicion." Ethan replied, "Then get me shipment histories from the last 6 months, Doc 4 through 7, and keep Claire Bennett's name out of every internal email." Claire stopped behind a stack of empty bins. Her pulse jumped. The woman in the blazer nodded. Understood. Ethan turned, and Claire ducked back too late. He saw her. Of course he saw her. Something sharp passed across his face. Not guilt exactly. Fear. Claire. She stepped out slowly. The hum of the building seemed to fade. Why does legal know my name? The woman in the blazer looked from Ethan to Claire, then lowered her eyes and walked away without a word. Claire waited. Ethan said nothing. Who are you? She asked. I told you. No. You gave me a name. She pointed toward the office. That was not a delivery driver conversation. Ethan slipped his hands into his jacket pockets. The brass compass moved against his keys with a tiny sound. I am trying to protect you. By lying to me? By keeping you away from something bigger than one bad manager. You do not get to decide what I can handle. I know. Then stop doing it. He looked tired suddenly, not from work, but from carrying a truth too long. For a moment, Claire thought he might finally say it. The whole thing. The real reason he knew too much, moved too easily, watched the building like it belonged to him. But footsteps echoed from the corridor. Derek appeared at the far end, his expression unreadable when he saw them together near the restricted office. Claire instinctively stepped back. Ethan noticed. So did Derek. Bennett, Derek called. My office. Before you clock out. Ethan's voice dropped. Do not go alone. Claire looked at him, hurt cutting through anger now. You keep telling me what not to do. Maybe try telling me the truth. She walked past him before he could answer, her wet shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. In Derek's office, the air smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. He closed the door halfway, not shut, just enough to make the room feel smaller. On his desk sat the same forms, now joined by a printed warning notice with Claire's name spelled correctly at the top. Failure to comply with verification procedure. Derek read aloud. Insubordination. Disruptive conduct. Claire stared at the paper. That is not what happened. It is what the report says happened. Then the report is false. Derek leaned back in his chair. You see your problem? Always arguing with paper. He slid a pen toward her. Sign the warning. Sign the doc forms. Keep your hours. Walk away clean. Claire looked at the pen, then at the clock on the wall, then through the gap in the door where the warehouse lights glowed white and endless. Her hands were cold, but her voice did not shake this time. No, Derek's face. Changed, barely. Just enough. Think carefully. I have. She picked up the warning notice, folded it once, and slipped it into her bag. And I am keeping a copy. Then she walked out before fear could talk her into obedience. She did not see Derek reach for his phone. She did not hear the message he left in a voice so quiet it barely rose above the hum of the office lights. She has something. Find out what. Outside, Claire clocked out with numb fingers. Ethan waited near the employee exit, rain-dark windows behind him, eyes full of words he still would not say. She passed him without stopping. Claire, please. She pushed the door open to the night air. When you are ready to be honest, Ethan, you know where to find me. The rain had started again, thin and cold, silver under the security lights. Claire pulled her coat tight and walked toward the south lot, unaware that the folded warning notice in her bag was not the only thing Derek wanted back. Claire made it halfway across the south lot before she realized her hands were shaking for a different reason now. Not because of Derek. Not because of the warning notice tucked in her bag like a folded piece of poison. Because of Ethan. Because every time she tried to place him in a simple box, he slipped out of it. Delivery driver. Night worker. Kind stranger. Man with secrets. Man who knew legal staff by name. Man who told people to keep her out of internal emails as if he had the authority to decide where her name did and did not belong. Rain dotted her glasses and blurred the glow from the streetlights. She wiped the lenses with the hem of her shirt and kept walking. The last bus would come in 11 minutes if it was on time, which in Boston minute might arrive in 5 or 30 or not at all. Her phone buzzed once in her coat pocket. For one hopeful, foolish second, she thought it was Ethan. It was not. It was the pharmacy reminding her that her mother's refill was ready for pickup and would cost $87.60. Claire stopped under the edge of the loading dock awning and stared at the message until the numbers swam. $87.60. She had made $52 at Rosie's, maybe $60 after tomorrow's cash tips if nobody left without paying again. The warehouse hours were supposed to fix the gap. Instead, she had walked out with a disciplinary warning, a manager watching her, and a man she almost trusted standing behind a wall of lies. She laughed once, short and tired, because if she did not laugh, she might cry in the parking lot, and she refused to let the security cameras keep that memory. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. You should have signed. Claire went very still. Rain tapped against the awning. A truck rolled past the far fence. The lot seemed wider suddenly, emptier, every shadow stretched too long. She looked back toward the warehouse doors. Through the glass, she could see movement inside, workers finishing the shift, orange vests under white lights. She could also see Ethan near the exit, speaking into his phone, his face tense as he scanned the lot. He saw her looking. Even from that distance, she felt the question in him. Are you safe? Claire turned away first, pride moving faster than fear. She would not run back to him because an anonymous text scared her. She would not give him the satisfaction of being right without giving her the dignity of being told the truth. The bus headlights appeared at the corner, dim through the rain, and Claire hurried to the stop. She climbed aboard, paid with a tired plastic card that beeped after the second try, and found a seat near the middle. The bus smelled like damp coats and old heat. A college student slept with earbuds in. A nurse in purple scrubs stared out the window like she had left part of herself at work. Claire hugged her bag to her chest and told herself the warning text was just Derek trying to scare her. Paper threats, office threats, coward threats. But when she reached into her bag to check the folded notice, her fingers brushed something else. A thin shipping label stuck to the back of the page. She pulled it free carefully. It must have caught there when Derek slid the forms across his desk. At first, it looked ordinary. Dock number, route code, pallet identification, warehouse stamp. Then, she noticed her employee number printed under verifier. Again, on a shipment dated 2 days before she had even started the job. Her stomach tightened. This was not just pressure. This was a setup with her name already built into it. By the time she reached her apartment, the rain had softened into mist. Claire lived on the second floor of a narrow brick building above a laundromat that rattled all night. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent, old carpet, and somebody's burned toast. Her mother, Linda Bennett, was asleep on the pull-out couch when Claire slipped inside. A lamp glowed beside her, illuminating the paperback open on her chest and the pill organizer on the table. Claire stood there for a moment, letting the sight steady her. This was why she worked. This was why she swallowed rude customers, sore feet, and managers like Derek. Not because she was weak. Because love made ordinary people do impossible math every day. She set down her bag quietly and moved to the tiny kitchen, where the refrigerator hummed with more confidence than it deserved. On the counter sat an envelope labeled rent in her mother's careful handwriting. Claire opened it and counted. $420. Still short by $200. She closed her eyes. Her phone lit up again. Ethan. Not a text this time. A call. Claire stared at the screen until it almost went dark, then answered. If you are calling to tell me to quit again, save your breath. Ethan's voice came through low, controlled, and worried. Did Derek contact you after you left? She looked toward her sleeping mother. Why would you ask that? Because he knows you took something from his office. I took a copy of a warning with my name on it. There may have been more attached to it. Claire slowly looked down at the shipping label in her hand. You mean the label with my employee number on a shipment from before I was hired? Silence. Not empty silence. Confirmation silence. Claire, Ethan said, listen to me carefully. That label matters. Then maybe you should start explaining why. He exhaled softly. Derek is not only falsifying doc checks. He is moving restricted shipments through charity routes. Then blaming temporary workers when numbers do not match. Restricted shipments. Medical equipment. Prescription supply pallets. Emergency inventory. Things that should never disappear. Claire felt cold spread through her chest. She thought of her mother's pharmacy message, the $87.60, the tiny cruelty of a system where medicine could vanish into paperwork and people called it business. And you knew? She whispered. I suspected. I needed proof. So what was I? Proof with an apron? No, his answer came too fast, pained. Never. You let me walk into that place. I tried to get you out. Without telling me why. Her voice rose, and her mother stirred on the couch. Claire lowered it instantly, turning toward the sink. You do not get credit for protecting me from a fire you refused to admit was burning. Ethan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the command was gone. Only regret remained. You are right. That stopped her more than any excuse would have. I am sorry, he said. I told myself secrecy was necessary. I told myself it kept the investigation clean. But the truth is, I was afraid. You looked at me like I was just a man, and I did not want to lose that. Claire gripped the edge of the counter. The apartment seemed too small for what his words were suggesting. Who are you, Ethan? Another silence. Longer. He was right there, at the edge of truth, and Claire could feel him choosing whether to cross it. Then he said, my last name is Whitmore. Claire did not move. The refrigerator hummed. Rain whispered against the window. In the other room, her mother breathed softly in sleep. Whitmore. As in Whitmore Global. As in the name on the warehouse. As in the silver letters on the trucks. As in the company that owned the place where Derek had cornered her with paperwork and fear. Claire closed her eyes, and every strange moment rearranged itself. The security guard nodding. The woman from legal. The way Ethan spoke of bad people owning buildings. You own it, she said. Yes. The word was gentle, but it landed like a door closing. Claire swallowed hard. And you sat in my diner letting me give you free pie. I did not know how to tell you. That you were rich? That I had lied. She looked at the brass-colored shipping label on the counter, then at the rent envelope, then at her sleeping mother. The gap between their worlds had never felt so wide. Do not call me again tonight, she said. Claire, please, the label, I will keep it safe. You need to keep yourself safe. Her laugh came out quiet and bitter. I have been doing that my whole life, Mr. Whitmore. She ended the call before he could answer. For a long time, she stood in the kitchen with the phone in one hand and the shipping label in the other. Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly past the laundromat, then continued down the street without stopping. Claire did not see it. Ethan did, from half a block away, sitting in the back seat of another car with the brass compass in his hand and the truth finally out, too late to feel like courage. Claire did not sleep after the call ended. She sat at the tiny kitchen table until the rain stopped, the shipping label lying in front of her beside a chipped mug of tea that went cold before she took a second sip. The apartment was quiet except for the laundromat machines rumbling below and her mother's soft breathing from the pull-out couch. Every few minutes, Claire looked at her phone, half expecting Ethan to call again, half hoping he would not. My last name is Whitmore. The words kept replaying in her head, turning every memory into something sharper. The coffee at booth 7. The freezer he fixed. The compass in his hand. The way he had listened when she talked about rent and medicine like he understood what it meant to count every dollar. Maybe he did understand worry, but not like she did. Not with overdue bills on the refrigerator and a bus card that sometimes declined. Dawn came gray and thin through the kitchen blinds. Claire stood, copied the shipping label with her phone, emailed it to herself, then wrote down the route code on the back of an old grocery receipt and slipped that receipt inside the lining of her wallet. Her mother woke as Claire was putting water on the stove. Linda Bennett blinked at her from the couch, silver hair flattened on one side. Eyes still soft with sleep. You are up early. Claire forced a smile. Could not sleep. Warehouse again tonight. Claire hesitated. The honest answer was no. The desperate answer was yes. Maybe. Linda studied her, the way mothers do when words are too small to hide behind. Did something happen? Claire wanted to say everything. She wanted to tell her mother about Derek, the fake forms, the label, Ethan, the last name that changed the room. But Linda had a doctor's appointment at 10, and worry already lived too close to her heart. Just a hard shift, Claire said. Linda reached for her hand. You do not have to carry the whole world, baby. Claire squeezed her fingers. I am not carrying the whole world. Just our corner of it. By noon, Claire was at the public library on Boylston Street, sitting at a computer between a teenager writing a school paper and an older man reading job listings. She searched Whitmore Global. The company website filled the screen with clean photos of glass offices, cargo planes, smiling employees in matching uniforms, and Ethan's face on the executive leadership page. Ethan Whitmore, founder and chief executive officer. 34 years old. Philanthropist. Logistics innovator. Private security partnerships. Net worth articles she closed as soon as the numbers made her feel sick. In the photo, he wore a navy suit and the kind of composed expression that belonged in magazines, not under the flickering lights of Rosie's. Claire stared at his eyes. They were the same eyes. That was the problem. Not the money. Not even the lie by itself. The problem was that the man in the photograph and the man who had eaten her apple pie were both real, and she did not know which one had chosen her. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. You have until tonight. Bring the label and anything else you copied. South Lot. 117. Claire's fingers went numb around the phone. The time made her stomach twist. 117. The same hour that would later split her life in two. She looked around the library, at people typing, printing, whispering, living ordinary afternoons. Trouble felt unreal in daylight. Almost embarrassing. Like fear was. Something you should apologize for bringing into a quiet room. She forwarded the message to her email, then opened a new draft addressed to the Boston Police Department tip line, but stopped before sending. What did she have? A label. A threatening text. A CEO who had lied to her, and an executive she did not trust. She needed someone real. Someone outside Whitmore. So she called Rosie. Not the diner. The woman. Rosie Alvarez had owned the place for 22 years, had survived 2 recessions, 1 divorce, a kitchen fire, and every health inspector in Suffolk County. She answered on the 3rd ring. Claire. Honey, you sound like you were standing on a ledge. Claire closed her eyes. I need advice. An hour later, Claire sat in the back booth of the diner while Rosie locked the front door for a private lunch break. The place smelled like coffee, grilled onions, and cinnamon from a pie Manny had pulled too early because he always rushed when nervous. Claire laid out what she could, the warehouse job, the forms, the label, the texts. She did not say Ethan's name at first. Rosie listened without interrupting, arms folded, red reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. When Claire finally whispered, "And Ethan Miller is not Ethan Miller," Rosie's eyebrows lifted. Of course he is not. Claire blinked. What does that mean? Sweetheart, that man tipped $30 on a $5 coffee and looked guilty about doing math. Nobody broke does that. Despite herself, Claire almost smiled. Then her face crumpled a little, and she hated it. I trusted him. Rosie's expression softened. Maybe you trusted the part that was true. How do I know which part that is? You watch what he does when telling the truth costs him something. The bell at the front door rattled, though the door was locked. Claire turned. Ethan stood outside in a dark coat. No hoodie, no delivery jacket, no disguise good enough to make him ordinary anymore. Rain had returned in a fine mist around him. Rosie looked at Claire. Want me to send him away? Claire stared at him through the glass. He did not knock again. He simply waited, hands visible, face tired, giving her the choice he should have given from the start. Claire's throat tightened. No, she said. Let him in. Rosie unlocked the door, but did not leave the room. Ethan stepped inside, and the diner seemed to remember him differently now. Booth 7. The counter. The pie case. All of it suddenly felt like evidence. He looked at Claire first, then Rosie, then back to Claire. I am not here to ask you to forgive me. Good, Claire said. Because I am not ready. He nodded once, accepting the hit. Derek contacted you. It was not a question. Claire slid her phone across the table. Ethan read the message. Something cold moved behind his eyes, but his voice stayed even. He is trying to get you isolated. Rosie leaned against the counter. And what are you trying to do, Mr. Whitmore? Ethan looked at her. Keep her alive and out of prison. Claire flinched at the bluntness. Prison. Ethan sat slowly across from her, not too close. The falsified shipments are tied to controlled medical inventory. If Derek attaches your employee number to enough records, he can make you look involved. Claire's mouth went dry. I started 3 days ago. Paper does not care. His gaze dropped to her hands. That is how people like Derek survive. They make lies look organized. Claire thought of what Derek had said. Always arguing with paper. Ethan placed a small flash drive on the table. This has copies of internal audit logs, badge access records, and camera timestamps proving you were not on those docs. It also has evidence against Derek, but it is not complete enough yet to catch everyone above him. Claire stared at the drive. Why give this to me? Because I lost the right to ask for trust without giving you proof. The words were quiet. No performance. No billionaire polish. Just a man setting something valuable down and letting her decide what it meant. Rosie picked up the coffee pot, though nobody had asked for coffee. Finally, a useful sentence. Ethan almost smiled, but it faded quickly. Claire, I have security watching the building and your apartment from a distance. They will not approach unless you ask, or unless there is an immediate threat. You had people watching my apartment? Her voice sharpened. After the SUV passed last night, yes. Claire froze. What SUV? Ethan's face changed. Just enough. Rosie set the coffee pot down. There was a car outside your place? Ethan turned back to Claire. A black SUV drove past your building twice after our call. It belongs to a shell vendor connected to Derek. The room seemed to tilt. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of every window. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. You do not have to face this alone. And what do I have to do in exchange? The hurt in his eyes was immediate. Nothing. People with your kind of money do not usually offer nothing. Then let me be different. Claire wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. Wanting had survived the lie. Ethan touched the brass compass on his key ring, then unclipped it and placed it between them. You gave me this because you thought I looked lost. His voice roughened slightly. You were right. I have spent years building systems to expose dishonest people, but I still became dishonest with you. Claire looked at the scratched little compass. The needle trembled under the cloudy plastic, never perfectly still, always trying to find north. I am going back tonight, she said. Ethan's head lifted. Claire, not alone, not secretly, but I am not hiding while Derek uses my name. It is dangerous. So is letting him write the story. Rosie nodded slowly, pride and fear mixing in her face. Ethan looked like every instinct in him wanted to refuse, command, protect, remove her from the board entirely. Instead, he closed his hand around nothing and made himself choose differently. Then we do it your way, he said. Claire met his eyes. With the police? With the police ready. With legal witnesses. With cameras preserved. With your consent on every step. And no more lies. Ethan held her gaze. No more lies. For the first time since the truth came out, Claire believed one sentence completely. Not because it fixed what he had broken. Because this time, saying it seemed to cost him the one thing billionaires were most used to keeping, control. At 12:43 that night, Claire Bennett stood beneath the awning behind Rosie's diner and watched the rain turn the street into black glass. She wore the same navy coat, the same worn sneakers, the same canvas bag across her shoulder, but nothing about her felt the same as it had the night before. Inside the bag were 2 flash drives, the one Ethan had given her, sealed inside a plastic sandwich bag, and the one she had copied at the library, tucked into the lining beside the grocery receipt with the route code. In her pocket was her phone, fully charged for once, with Rosie's number, her mother's number, and a Boston police detective named Maria Alvarez saved at the top. Rosie had insisted on calling her niece, who happened to work financial crimes, and had apparently inherited the family talent for making people tell the truth without raising her voice. Claire had expected Ethan to arrive in one of the black SUVs, surrounded by men in dark coats and quiet radios. Instead, he pulled up in an ordinary gray pickup truck with a dent near the back bumper. No driver. No entourage. Just Ethan behind the wheel, wearing a dark sweater under a rain jacket, the brass compass clipped to his keys where she could see it. He stepped out and did not come too close. You still want to do this? He asked. Claire looked down the empty street, then back at him. No, his expression tightened. Then we do not. I said I do not want to, she said. I did not say I will not. For a moment, Something like pride crossed his face, but he was careful with it, as if he knew even admiration could feel heavy when it came from him. Detective Alvarez is 2 blocks from the warehouse with 2 officers and a warrant request ready if Derek takes the bait. My legal team is monitoring the internal servers. Security cameras are being preserved off-site. Nothing you say tonight has to be brave. It only has to be true. Claire nodded, but her throat was dry. And you? I will be close. Not hidden. He met her eyes. Not from you. The answer steadied her more than she wanted to admit. She climbed into the passenger seat, and they drove through Boston under a low ceiling of clouds, past closed storefronts, sleeping apartment windows, and puddles that caught the red blur of traffic lights. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The city seemed quieter at that hour, stripped down to essentials. Tires on wet pavement, windshield wipers, the soft rattle of the heater. Claire looked at Ethan's hands on the wheel. The same hands that had accepted terrible coffee, repaired the freezer, held the compass like it mattered. When did you start investigating Derek? She asked. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. 4 months ago, a charity clinic in Worcester reported missing medical equipment from a route we sponsored. On paper, the shipment arrived complete. In reality, half of it vanished. And you went undercover because you did not trust your own people? I trusted some. Not enough. The thefts were being covered by clean reports, signed by temporary workers who quit or were fired before anyone questioned them. Claire looked out the window. People nobody would believe. Yes. People like me. His silence answered first. Then he said, yes. That honesty hurt, but it also fit. It fit too well. Why Rosie's? She asked. You did not wander into my diner by accident, did you? No, Claire turned sharply. Ethan nodded once, accepting the disappointment before she even spoke. A warehouse driver mentioned night crew meeting at Rosie's after shifts. I came in looking for leads. I did not expect you. She stared at him. So the first night was part of your investigation. At first. The pie. Real. The bleeding hand. Real. I caught it on a dock latch. The lost wallet. He exhaled. Not real. Claire looked away. There it was again, the sting of one small lie making every true thing defend itself. Ethan did not rush to soften it. That mattered. I should have paid, he said quietly. I should have told you. I should have walked away when I realized I wanted to come back for reasons that had nothing to do with Derek. But you did not. No, the pickup stopped at a red light. Rain ran over the windshield in silver veins. Ethan looked at her then, not as a CEO, not as a man arranging a rescue, but as someone finally standing without armor. I kept coming back because you made the world feel less bought. Claire held his gaze until the light turned green. She had no answer for that. The South Warehouse appeared at the edge of the industrial district, massive and white under floodlights, with Whitmore Global printed in blue letters across the loading bay. At night, the building looked less like a workplace and more like a machine pretending to sleep. Ethan parked 2 streets over beside a closed auto parts store. You are sure you want to be the one who walks in? He asked. Claire checked her phone. 1:07 in the morning. 10 minutes until Derek's demanded time. He used my name. I want mine back. Ethan reached into his pocket and handed her a tiny microphone clipped to what looked like a coat button. Only if you choose. She took it, turned it over, and clipped it near her collar. Can everyone hear me? Detective Alvarez can. So can I. Claire swallowed. Then try not to interrupt unless I ask. A faint, sad smile touched his mouth. I am learning. She stepped out into the rain before her courage could drain away. The walk to the south lot felt longer than 2 blocks. Every sound sharpened, water under her shoes, wind moving loose plastic along a fence, the far groan of a loading dock door. Her phone vibrated. Ethan's message lit the screen. I am here. She did not respond, but she kept walking. The white warehouse van was already parked near the gate when she arrived. Derek stood under the security light with his clipboard tucked under one arm, as if even blackmail required paperwork. You came, he said. Claire stopped several yards away, close enough for the microphone, far enough to breathe. You told me to. Do you have the label? I have questions. Derek laughed softly. That is your problem, Claire. You always think questions protect you. No, she said. I think answers expose people. His smile faded. Give me what you took. Why? So you can put my employee number on another shipment I never touched. Derek's eyes narrowed. For the first time, he looked toward the corners of the lot, checking shadows. You need to be careful. I am being careful. That is why I made copies. The word copies landed exactly where she hoped it would. Derek's face changed, just a fraction, but enough. He stepped closer, not fast, not loud, simply trying to shrink the space between them. Claire held her ground, though her pulse thundered in her ears. Who else has them? He asked. Claire thought of Rosie, Detective Alvarez, Ethan waiting in the rain, and her mother asleep under a lamp. She thought of every temporary worker whose name had been used like disposable ink. Enough people, she said. Derek's calm broke around the edges. You have no idea what you are standing in. Then say it clearly. Those shipments were redirected before they ever hit my docks. I cleaned the records. That is all. Claire's breath caught. The microphone near her collar felt suddenly warm against her skin. Who told you to clean them? Derek stared at her, and for 1 second, she saw fear behind his arrogance. Not fear of her, fear of someone above him. Then headlights swept across the lot from the service road, bright and sudden. Derek turned. Claire turned too. A white van rolled forward, blocking the path to the gate without touching anything, without noise, just enough to close the exit. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. Ethan's voice came through her hidden earpiece, low and steady. Claire, walk toward the light on your left. Slowly. But Derek heard something in her breath, saw the decision in her face. Who are you talking to? He demanded. Claire took 1 step back, then another. Rain slid down her cheeks, but her voice came out clear. Someone who should have told me the truth sooner. At the far end of the lot, 3 black SUVs turned in through the service entrance, their headlights cutting through the rain like dawn arriving early. Derek went still. Claire did not look away from him this time. She did not need to. For the first time all night, the man with the clipboard looked like paper would not save him. The headlights washed over the south lot, turning rain into silver lines and Derek Sloan into a man suddenly aware of every camera, every witness, every lie he had stacked under his own feet. Claire stood near the loading dock light, breathing hard but standing straight, her canvas bag pressed against her side. The white van by the gate did not move. The black SUV stopped in a clean line several yards away, and for 1 long second, nobody spoke. Then the rear door of the first SUV opened. Ethan stepped out into the rain. No hoodie, no torn jacket, no borrowed name left to hide behind. He wore a dark overcoat over a black suit, but it was not the clothes that changed the air. It was the way every security officer shifted when he appeared, the way the warehouse guards lowered their radios, the way Derek's face drained of color before Ethan had taken 3 steps. Claire had seen rich people before. Customers who snapped fingers for refills, landlords who acted like mercy was bad accounting, men in watches worth more than her car had been before it died. Ethan did not look like that kind of rich. He looked responsible for everything the rain was touching. He walked toward her first, not Derek, not the guards, not the cameras. Are you okay? He asked, low enough that only she could hear. Claire nodded once, though her hands were cold and her heartbeat was still running. I am okay. His eyes searched her face, then lowered to the microphone near her collar. You did it. He said he cleaned the records. Detective Alvarez heard. Derek found his voice then, thin and angry. This is a misunderstanding. Ethan turned to him slowly. The softness he had shown Claire disappeared, not replaced by rage, but by something steadier and more final. No, Derek. A misunderstanding is when a truck goes to the wrong dock. This is falsified verification, stolen medical inventory, witness intimidation, and a 6-month pattern of blaming temporary workers for shipments you helped redirect. Derek's mouth opened, then closed. You have no proof. The woman in the navy blazer from legal stepped out of the second SUV with a tablet in her hands. Behind her came Detective Maria Alvarez in a raincoat, badge visible, expression calm enough to make the night feel even more serious. 2 uniformed officers stood near the service entrance, not rushing anyone, simply making clear that the exit was no longer Derek's to control. We have badge logs, the legal director said. Camera backups, doc. Scans, altered timestamps, vendor payments, and now your recorded statement. Derek looked at Claire then, and for a moment, the old habit returned to his face, the assumption that she was the weakest point in the room. She is lying. Claire felt the words hit, but they did not enter the way they would have yesterday. Yesterday, she might have wondered whether paper could beat truth. Tonight, truth had witnesses. Ethan stepped slightly, not in front of her, but beside her. That mattered. He did not block her voice. He stood where she could still be seen. Detective Alvarez looked at Claire. Ms. Bennett, did Mr. Sloan ask you to sign verification forms for a dock assignment you did not work? Claire swallowed, then answered clearly. Yes. Did he later contact you and ask you to return a shipping label connected to your employee number? Yes. Did you begin work after the date printed on that label? Yes. Derek shook his head, laughing once like he still believed arrogance could become armor. You are going to take the word of a waitress over a regional operations manager? The question hung there, ugly and familiar. Claire had heard versions of it her whole life. You are just a waitress. Just a renter. Just temporary. Just tired enough to sign. Ethan looked at Derek, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the lot. Her job title is not a measure of her honesty. Yours is not a shield for your crimes. Something in Claire's chest loosened. Not because Ethan defended her, but because he said it in front of everyone. In front of uniforms. In front of legal. In front of the building that had tried to turn her name into a disposable line on a form. Detective Alvarez gave a small nod to the officers. Mr. Sloan, you need to come with us. There was no chaos. No dramatic struggle. Just the quiet collapse of a man who had expected fear to do his work for him. Derek looked once toward the white van, but the driver had already stepped out with both hands visible, speaking nervously to another officer near the gate. The night continued around them. Rain falling, trucks idling beyond the fence, the warehouse lights buzzing above dock doors. But for Claire, the sound changed. The building no longer sounded like a machine pretending to sleep. It sounded like something finally waking up. Inside the warehouse, the audit began before sunrise. Employees were asked to remain for interviews, but this time there were chairs, coffee, and legal notices explaining protection from retaliation in plain English. Temporary workers who had been silent for months started speaking. A man named Luis admitted his badge had been used on a shipment during a night he was home with the flu. A single mother named Dana pulled 3 warning notices from her locker, each one tied to docks she had never entered. Manny from Rosie's arrived with 2 boxes of breakfast sandwiches because Rosie had apparently decided justice should not happen on an empty stomach. Claire sat in a conference room wrapped in a dry company blanket, holding a paper cup of coffee she barely tasted. Through the glass wall, she watched Ethan move from table to table, listening more than speaking. No one called him Ethan Miller now. They called him Mr. Whitmore, Sir, Chief Executive Officer. Every title placed another inch of distance between the man who had shared pie with her and the man who owned the walls. Just after 7, he found her near a window overlooking the loading bays. Dawn had turned the rain pale. The police have enough to charge Derek and several outside vendors, he said. The board will receive a full report by noon. Every worker named in false records will get legal support paid by the company. Claire kept her eyes on the lot. That is good. It is not enough. She looked at him then. He seemed exhausted, older somehow, as if the suit had stopped being armor and become weight. No, she said. It is not. He accepted that without flinching. Claire, I am sorry. The words were simple. She wished they had been enough. You protected me tonight, she said. But you also let me care about someone who was not fully real. Pain crossed his face. Everything I felt was real. Maybe, but I did not have all the facts. You did. He looked down at the brass compass in his hand. I was afraid you would treat me differently if you knew. Claire's laugh was soft. Not cruel, just sad. Ethan, you did not just hide your money. You hid the ground I was standing on. He closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them, there was no defense left. You are right. She reached for the compass. He gave it to her immediately. The little needle trembled under the scratched plastic, searching for north. Claire turned it in her palm, remembering the night she had handed it to him as a joke, a kindness, a tiny piece of herself. Then she placed it on the windowsill between them. I need time. Ethan nodded, though the words clearly hurt. Take all of it. And do not fix my life behind my back. I will not. No secret doctors. No secret rent. No quiet favors dressed up as coincidence. No more secrets. Claire picked up her bag. At the conference room door, she stopped and looked back. The first sunlight touched the wet pavement outside, making the whole south lot shine like something washed clean but not yet repaired. Use your power right, she said. Not for me. For everyone Derek thought nobody would believe. Then she walked out of the warehouse under her own name, leaving Ethan Whitmore standing beside the compass, finally understanding that protecting someone was not the same as earning back their trust. For 3 weeks, Claire Bennett did not see Ethan Whitmore except in places she could not avoid. His name appeared in local business headlines beside words like internal audit, worker protections, and executive accountability. His face flashed across the television above the counter at Rosie's while customers argued over pancakes and coffee. His voice came through one short press conference, calm and stripped of polish, saying that Whitmore Global had failed the people who kept its warehouses running, and that failure would not be hidden behind corporate language. Claire watched from behind the counter with a pot of coffee in her hand, pretending she was only waiting for table 4 to ask for a refill. Ethan did not mention her name. He did not make her a symbol. He did not turn her kindness into a story he could own. That mattered more than she wanted it to. The company paid for legal representation for every worker, whose name had been used on false paperwork. Warning notices disappeared from personnel files. Lost wages were restored. A new anonymous reporting line was created outside the company chain of command. And at the South Warehouse, the temporary badge desk was moved out from behind the supervisor's offices and placed beside a glass wall where cameras could see who came and went. Small things. Practical things. The kind of things that did not look romantic on television but changed whether people went home afraid. Claire kept working at Rosie's, though she quit the warehouse after Detective Alvarez told her her statement was complete. Her mother's medicine arrived one Friday with a lower price after a patient assistance program finally approved the application Ethan had not secretly filed, because Claire filed it herself with Rosie sitting beside her and Linda correcting every date in blue ink. That was the difference now. Help was allowed. Control was not. On a quiet Tuesday night, near closing, Claire was wiping down booth 7 when the bell above the door rang. She knew before she looked up. Maybe it was the way the air paused. Maybe it was the compass, still sitting in a little dish beside the register where Rosie had placed it after Ethan returned it through Detective Alvarez with a note that said, "Only when she wants it back." Ethan stood by the door in a plain gray coat. No security visible through the window. No expensive car at the curb. No assistant behind him holding a schedule. Just Ethan, with rain on his shoulders and uncertainty in his eyes. Claire leaned on the table, cloth in hand. "We are closed." He nodded. "I know. That usually means people leave." "I can." She studied him for a moment. He did not move closer. That was new too. The old Ethan, the hidden Ethan, might have tried to fix the silence. This one let her own it. Claire looked toward the kitchen. Manny was gone. Rosie had taken Linda home after dinner. The diner was empty except for the hum of the refrigerators and the pink-blue neon trembling across the windows. "You have 5 minutes," Claire said. Ethan stepped inside and stopped near the counter. The board approved the fund. Today, Claire's fingers stilled around the cloth. The Worker Protection Fund. Yes. Independent oversight. Legal aid, emergency rent assistance, transportation, and whistleblower support for hourly workers in logistics and food service. Not just Whitmore employees. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a folder on the counter. "It needs a director." Claire's expression cooled automatically. "Ethan, not you." He lifted a hand gently. "Not unless you ever choose that." Rosie nominated a retired labor advocate. Detective Alvarez connected us with 2 nonprofit attorneys. "Your name is not on the paperwork." Claire opened the folder anyway. The first page carried the title The Compass Fund. Her throat tightened before she gave herself permission to feel it. "You named it after the keychain." "I named it after what you taught me." She looked up. Ethan's voice was quiet. "I used to think power meant seeing everything from above. Routes, numbers, risk, profit. You saw what I kept missing from the ground. A person at a counter. A worker with a warning notice. A mother choosing between rent and medicine. You were right. If power does not bend down, it is just height." Claire looked away toward the window. Outside, rain slid down the glass the same way it had the night he first came in, only now the street did not feel as cold. "That almost sounds rehearsed," she said. A faint smile touched his mouth. "I practiced in the car and hated every version. This was the unrehearsed one. Mostly." She tried not to smile, but it happened anyway, small and reluctant. Ethan saw it and looked down like he did not want to scare it away. Claire walked behind the counter and picked up the little brass compass from Rosie's dish. The plastic face was still scratched. The needle still trembled, never perfectly still, always searching. She carried it to him and placed it in his palm. His fingers closed around it slowly. I was angry because I thought the poor delivery driver was fake, she said. But the man who listened was real. The man who looked ashamed when I gave him pie was real. The man who stood beside me instead of in front of me that night was real. Ethan swallowed. I want to be that man without the lie. Then keep being him. His eyes lifted to hers. For a second, the diner became very quiet. The kind of quiet that does not need to be filled. Ethan reached into his pocket again, then hesitated. This is not a proposal. Claire raised an eyebrow. That is a dramatic sentence. He opened his hand. Inside was not a diamond ring, not velvet, not spectacle. It was a small silver key on a simple ring next to the compass. Rosie is expanding. She wants to start a pay-it-forward meal shelf. I bought the vacant storefront next door and transferred the lease to her at $1 a year. She threatened to throw soup at me until I promised to tell you it was her idea. Claire laughed then, fully, unexpectedly, the sound breaking something open in both of them. That sounds like Rosie. There will be no plaque with my name. No cameras. No press. Good. But there is a kitchen, storage space, and a back room for legal clinics twice a month if the fund board approves. Claire looked at the key, then at him. This was not a gift wrapped around her life. This was a door built beside it. You finally learned the difference, she said. Between helping and taking over? Yes. Ethan nodded. I am still learning. Months later, people would say the Compass Fund began because a billionaire cleaned up his company. Claire knew better. It began with a slice of apple pie, a bad cup of coffee, and a woman too tired to stop being kind. It grew in a diner where workers could eat before payday, where legal volunteers sat in the back booth on Thursdays, where Rosie kept a jar labeled no questions, just bus fare beside the register. And 1 year after the night in the rain, Ethan came back to booth 7 after closing, nervous in a way no boardroom had ever made him. This time, when he opened his hand, there was a ring, simple and bright, resting beside the brass compass. You were my north before you knew my name, he said. Claire looked at the man kneeling on the worn diner floor, the billionaire without an audience, the stranger who had finally become honest, and she understood that love was not proven by wealth, or rescue, or grand words. Under bright lights, it was proven by what a person did after the truth cost them something. She said yes with tears in her eyes and laughter in her breath, while the neon sign buzzed above them and the compass needle trembled softly, still searching, still finding its way home.